helping the team close deals builds momentum for the rest of the organization. And I think if I question them, I haven't had too many people leave my organization, right? They tend to, if you build good relationships, you build good trust, you're able to build a relationship, and in a complex world of sales, and a challenging world of sales, like no one ever says sales is easy, right? But if you find a good team that you work with well and you build a relationship, you tend to stick with it or want to stick with it.
Welcome, everyone, to the 1% Edge podcast, where we dive into the journeys of extraordinary guests committed to getting 1% better every day. Today's topic, it's all about opportunity inspection, especially in the world of a remote workforce. And to help us out with that, I'm honored to have Chris Bowman, VP of North American Commercial Sales at CMO Logic. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Carlos. Really excited to be here today.
Thanks, buddy. In all fairness, I've known Chris for many years, so I'm really happy to have him on here, and I'm happy that we've been able to stay friends and stay connected.
Absolutely. Over the years, you've taught me a lot around the opportunity inspection and the value selling aspect of it. So I'm excited to have a more detailed conversation on the topic.
Looking forward to it. So for our audience, let's first kind of describe the situation. So we use the word opportunity inspection. Does that mean forecasting? Does that mean deal strategy? Does that mean all the above? Describe for me this whole idea, the bigger picture of opportunity inspection.
Yeah, Carlos, that one's an easy one to the extent that I think it's all of the above. When I think about opportunity inspection, it's anywhere from when pipeline is originally created, to the company that it's created with, to the use case that they're looking at, to are they going to test, the specific technologies. Great. Do we have all the standard ones? Do we have access to power? Do we understand, their buying process, their paper process? And then, do we have a good relationship? Is there a reseller? Are we going through the channel? And then there's also this element of opportunity inspection with the individuals that are running the opportunity. And is it consistent with their history of how they run opportunities, or are they trying to do something unnatural? So that I also think is a big topic when I think about opportunity inspection nowadays, and getting deeper and deeper, especially with everything that's going on with SaaS and the macro economy. You got to be really careful and really diligent about your inspection.
All right. So I figure we start here. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes or some of the hardest parts of opportunity inspection and forecasting?
Yeah, two different questions there. I think the mistakes you make every 6 to 9 months, and it's you become too trusting. You think you got this one in the bag. You think you won it, and you let your foot off the gas because you just won the last 9, right? And then you hear the things the sales happy years come back. You don't ask that last follow-up question. You don't clean the plate. You don't really go deep. You don't ask who can say no again and again and again because you think you've won it already. And I feel like as long as I've been doing this, more than 10 years in the field, it happens to me every 9 months or so where we got this one, boss, don't worry, I'm forecasting it. And sure enough, we get blindsided. So that's, I think, one of the biggest mistakes. In terms of the challenges with inspection, I think it's rooted in something that we talk about all the time in sales. We talk about all the time in our personal and professional lives. It's building trust with our reps and the technology that they're using. In the remote world, I can call my team nights, weekends, Sunday morning, they'll answer. But that becomes overwhelming and kind of breaks down a good relationship that we've developed over the years for the most part. And so you have to be trusting in your behavior, not only trusting of the individuals when it comes to the notes that they're putting in and the information that they're feeding me, but also the technologies that are giving me some leading indicators of, okay, you've got your CRM scores, you've got your other scores that are indicating that this is trending positively. There has to be some trust, because when you're talking to the prospect or the end buyer, there's a very fine line, I think, about a passion, a desire to close, and a desperation and a need to close. So those are the things that I think about when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's right on the money, and there's a lot there. So one of the things I want to focus on first is, um, whether it's honesty or trust or relationship perspective. I think, sometimes a mistake people, you get these frontline managers or executives in the accounts, and they're, this, maybe it's part of the old school of just being a hard ass, but they're just confrontational. And it's almost like it's bad enough you got to battle through your customer and their gauntlet they put you through, to then have to fight your boss and all that, our own internal stuff. Man, it's overwhelming. And I just feel like it doesn't have to be that way. You and your boss are in it together to win the deal, right? And how have you been able to kind of build that trust, that relationship with your reps?
Outside of just taking them out to happy hour, that's always a good way. But you know, building a relationship with something is not something that happens overnight. But I think you got to start with the trust piece. You have to start with good intentions, and then I was always raised with the old expression, you get more sugar than you do of salt. And I don't know the actual, if there's a difference in weight, but the purpose, right? And helping the team close deals builds momentum for the rest of the organization. And I think if I question them, I haven't had too many people leave my organization, right? They tend to, if you build good relationships, you build good trust. You're able to build a relationship, and in a complex world of sales, and a challenging world of sales, like no one ever says sales is easy, right? But if you find a good team that you work with well and you build a relationship, you tend to stick with it or want to stick with it. And so where I was going with that is, my job, I've always felt, and I encourage my frontline managers to always think about, their job is to remove barriers in a cycle and not create them. We don't want to create more red tape. We don't want to force them to have unnatural conversations, as long as they're doing the inspection that we're encouraging them to do. And then, joining calls with them, helping them draft up emails, and wording things in a way that can help get the answers that we need collectively as a team to close the opportunities. If I just sit, behind the desk and bark orders at the team, they don't always have the confidence then to turn around and go to, the potential buyer, the customer, with those questions. Instead, they're intimidated on both ends, and confidence is then lacking, and the deal can fall apart because of it.
Great point. And one thing, Chris, to give you some kudos is, and you even said it in your comments, you lead by example, right? You don't have a problem going to the account. You don't have a problem asking some of the things you're asking your teams to ask in front of the customer, versus just sitting back in the office and going, "Hey, I really need the deal. Go get this." You're willing to go into the trenches with them, and I think that's what makes you a great leader from that perspective. Where sometimes I see leaders, they lack their own confidence, so they hide behind a desk and they bark orders, but they're not demonstrating the skills and behavior that they're expecting of their reps.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that compliment. I appreciate it. I think I can blame it on a very simple element, Carlos, that being in front of the customer and having those conversations and being part of that, the discovery, the negotiation, the proof of value, proof of concept, that's still the very much the fun part of a sales leader's job, I think. Uh, Not all sales reps become good sales leaders, and I think, um, and that's just a varying degree of, situational things that lead to that. But I always think the administrative tasks are necessary, and there's a passion behind, like, data and inspection and human behavior and so on and so forth. But what got us into this game originally was, I think, for me at least, the passion of talking to customers and being, customer facing. It leads to just, I think, broader success. So it's not necessarily again, I appreciate the compliment, but it's also the fun of sales for me still to this day is being in front of the customer and having these discussions, understanding their challenges, trying to solve for them.
Yeah, and Chris, I don't know if everyone sees it as fun. I'm with you. In fact, I was telling some of the story recently. I was interviewing for a multi-billion-dollar software company as a VP, or in my career, and I was really excited about this opportunity. As I sat down and I interviewed different people at this organization, and I interviewed someone that had a similar role that they wanted me to do, that they felt was successful. This individual tells me how internally facing it is and how he fights with HR and internal processes and products to make sure he can support the team. And I was like, if those are the skills that are critical to being a VP here, I understand them. I also know that those are not me. I want to be in the trenches having fun with the team and winning over the customer and creating relationships at different levels with the customer and being a part of this team out in the front line, not being in the ivory tower, I don't know, dealing with switches and HR and product. And again, I'm not knocking it. I just know that's not my strength.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a balance. There's a balance. I think there's a time and place for both, right? You need to be fighting and ensuring your team has the support that they need, has the product and the product development, the roadmap that they need. At the same time, you need to be in front of your team doing what HR and the other pieces of the business want you to be doing with your frontline salespeople, which is coaching them, mentoring them, helping them do better. That's one of the biggest challenges I've found in sales leadership is really balancing your time appropriately. And I think it fluctuates. There are times when end of the quarter, I'm not meeting too much internally. End of the quarter, end of the week, end of the month, I'm in front of the customers as much as possible in front of the deals. Perhaps that following week though, I'm making sure that deals, we use Clary, we use Salesforce, we use all those things, making sure the notes are well input, make sure that our pipeline for 1-2 quarters out, 3 quarters out, 4 quarters out is well inspected, and we're having career ladder conversations, we're doing all those things. So there's a time and a place for everything, but I would agree, no one's perfect at all of it.
Fair. So, and this is going to basically narrow down to how it's changed, but traditionally, especially going up through the ranks, a lot of times deal inspection, opportunity inspection was very internally focused, right? It was almost like when, how much, and what's your next step, versus really about the customers and what's driving their need to change and what's their process and that side of the equation. How has deal inspection in your mind changed the last few years? Or
Yeah, I think lately there's been a unique shift. It's not a bad one, but it's been where finance has a lot more power. I remember 2 years ago it was the CTO or the CIO is the new CEO, right? And technology is driving big business decisions, they're driving budget, they're driving this. And over the last 12 months, maybe even 18 months, I've seen a shift to the CFO. The office of the CFO is driving a lot more of the decisions. So things like ROI, things like business value realization, business value assessments, whether or not you have that type of office in your sales org, it's something that you should be really conscious of. And now we're doing a lot of work around selling to the CFO, even over email. We're imagining the way we position our software or where we position just the stage of the opportunity that eventually this email might end up in a finance person or procurement person's inbox. And so we're framing some of that, those conversations differently. We're framing up the value of our opportunity, the value of the solution that we're bringing to the table. And so I think that's changed a little bit. When it comes to the internal versus external inspection, it's definitely more customer facing, right? If you're not proving value in your customer base or in your prospect base on a day-to-day basis, you're going to be replaced. There aren't many industries that aren't competitive nowadays. And so you have to be differentiating yourself. You have to be focused on where they see this wise guy. Actually, this isn't prompted, but this wise guy, his name is Carlos, he told me a long time, the value is in the eye of the buyer, right? And so if I'm not to some degree catering to that, then I'm going to be in my own world thinking that I've won the opportunity when I've only won it based on what I see value and not what they see value.
I was going to say great point, but that's kind of self-serving, I guess.
It still is, rings true to this day.
Well, all right. So another aspect, I think back when I was a worldwide VP of sales, I was on the road all the time, right? And there was a lot of being with my reps and meeting them, even if it, sorry, even if it wasn't at a customer, I was out in region because I wanted to get to know them better. Now that we have a remote workforce and COVID, with everybody wanting a little bit more balance, how's that changed? And how are you dealing with maybe less interaction, at least physical interaction with folks, and more over Zoom or other platforms?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I've got the answer to that. I'll give you what I've tried to do to some degree of success, but I believe the fallout of what you're talking about is a little bit less loyalty to companies as we're seeing from a rep perspective, because you aren't really there on a constant basis to bring them under your wing and to coach them and mentor them. You try to do as much of that as you can with your regular one-on-ones, and you get out in the field, to your point. But with a customer base across North America for me, and reps kind of scattered all over, call it 20 reps. I can't be everywhere every week. And I think that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to get to know people on a more personal basis, is something that I've tried. Like I genuinely care about the team that I work with. And I think my team knows that. For anyone that ends up listening to this, I think that they would nod their head and say, yeah, Bowman cares. But how do you do that in a genuine way? That's a personal touch that you have to put. I always tell people in the sales world, just relate it back to, my profession. You got to find your own voice in sales. When someone approaches the customer, I've got this good friend, I'm not going to name his name. He was, swears like a sailor, really great guy, from the Midwest. And then he would get on calls and he would just button up and be very, very formal. And I used to tell him, I'm like, is that really you? Are you finding your voice? And it made asking tough questions more difficult because you were trying to do it in a voice that wasn't yours. And so I really encourage people to find their voice. But in that same sentiment is when you're building a relationship with someone, is like, how did you find your best friends? How did you find your partner? And it's you by you being yourself. So you got to do that with your reps and kind of be really genuinely curious about what they do outside of work, what their passions are, and you need to embrace it. A little long-winded. Sorry about that one, Carlos.
No, that's fair.
I think it's important.
I do a lot of selling remotely because, as I remind folks, when it's your travel budget coming out of your pocket, all of a sudden you're a little bit pickier of flying around and meeting someone. But, and then people tell me, the fact that we do a lot of video conferencing now versus meeting face-to-face has really changed. And I go, look, I get it. You got to still find your opportunity, because if you think back throughout your career, whether it's connections with your own team or the customer, it's that having a coffee in the hallway after the meeting. It's the going to the cafeteria with them for lunch and sitting down and hearing about their families and what's going on in their world. It's the having dinner and, they're sitting next to you and you get to have some one-on-one time for 10, 15, 30 minutes with someone that really is the stepping stones or their foundations of having a real business relationship.
Absolutely.
And If you're 100% remote, again, I'm not knocking it because I don't mind not leaving my house. I enjoy living here. So, but you got to find those moments. And if you can't do it in person, you got to try to find those moments over this type of environment. And it's just a little harder. So you got to even, I know a lot of customers today is part of their thing. They're going, hey, look, we got to get back on the flights. We got to get back in front of our customers. We got to create more of these one-on-one touch points with people so that we can really build real honest relationships with folks. You can't just rely on doing all your business over a video conference. And it's not saying, get in the office or don't be remote. It's look, there's a happy medium somewhere in there. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you said it best. Just getting out there. It's the conversations that happen beside, the water cooler conversations, whether that be with your internal folks or with the customer. It's the meeting outside the meeting. I feel like I've heard that, but I don't know where. So if I stole it from anybody,
we're happy to steal great ideas from others.
Yeah, and that's really it. It's you take everyone out for dinner and you both end up walking to the bar for another beer or a coffee or something like that, and you have a 5-minute conversation in passing, and they give you this tidbit of information that it just wouldn't be natural to come up over a Zoom conversation. Or, the meeting's over, the recordings are shut down, people are passing, and you kind of say, what are you doing this weekend? And you get a little bit of information of what they're doing, and it leads to a follow-up question. And then they or you in that own, line of thinking, relate it back to the meeting you just had and give you some additional context. Is, my boss who actually signs the paperwork, he likes fly fishing too. Well, now I know I might have to come back to town to take him fly fishing or something along those lines. The set, 45, 60 minutes that you set on a Zoom has such defined intentions and a defined agenda that, you can force, to break that mold and to have a conversation, but it's also so much easier if you get in front of people, and you can't just do it once and let it go. And it's not like you need to be there every week, but periodically, repeating those behaviors, you'll get more and more, you'll break down more and more. And people should play the long game. This is the last comment I'll say is play the long game. If you intend to be in software sales, in sales in general, for an extended period of time, it's a small world, right? That person that's a developer today might be a VP of engineering or a CTO in 15 years or 7 years based on, how quick these people's careers go. And so you always got to be conscious of that. So,
100%. I call it, we're in the raving fan business, and it's at all levels, right? Not just that one person that likes you, because what I've noticed as I'm getting older, some of the people that I worked with before, they're pushing into retirement, and some of them already have. So if I'm not care, I need to build relationships constantly with new people at different levels, because you're right. Today they're the evaluator, tomorrow they're the decision maker.
Yes, and I think that's happening a lot lately, especially. I mean, everyone talks about the baby boomers or whatever, the next generation that are retiring. There's a lot of up and comers, and then technology is just moving at at an incredible pace. So staying in tune with all of that and the people creating it, writing it, building it, buying it, really, really important.
All right. Speaking of technology, there's more and more being thrown at this problem or, deal inspection and forecasting. How important is critical thinking still in this behavior or this activity?
Yeah, you're setting me up. That's a good one. So I think that's the most important piece. I go back even to the days, more than a decade ago when I was an SDR. We started to have a lot more sales automation, and I personally, I never won the competition, which wasn't really a competition of who could send the most emails. Because if that was the competition that people were focused on, they were missing the end game. They were missing the big point. And so more and more and more, I think it's really important to just use your brain. That's what I tell people that are moving up or moving horizontal, just moving in general in their career, trying to get better, trying to learn. it's make sure that all the while you're using your brain. And that rings true with the next generation or the next wave of AI tooling in terms of inspection, in terms of sales automation, in terms of everything. You have to think about uh, AI and all these other tools. They're really good at answering your questions, right? They can get you the answer that you need. What I'm worried about with myself, but with others, with my kids, even in my personal life, is understanding, having like situational awareness to understand like what questions to ask. And because of that, I think when it comes to deal inspection, when it comes to moving a deal through a cycle, asking the right questions at the right time requires you to understand the bigger situation. And that essentially, I think, is critical thinking within sales. So all the tooling in the world won't solve for that piece. And it's not a lost art, but it's one that's harder to navigate these days. And I look for it a lot in the salespeople that I bring on.
Yeah, I think one of the traps, and this comes from a mutual friend of ours, Steve Fitz, and he's got this line like, growth comes through discomfort. In looking for the easy answers everywhere, and you don't go through that discomfort, you don't really grow, right? It's hard to think critically if you don't force yourself to suffer through it. It's kind of like working out. I can't just tell AI to give me a bigger muscle. I really got to strain my muscle. I got to break some muscle fiber for it to rebuild stronger than it was before. And I think, and I love using all the tools. Don't get me wrong, but you also got to use that noggin if you want it to get stronger and better.
100%. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking any of the tools. I'd buy more of them if I was allowed to. I'd use more of them. I think I'm really curious about the new tooling that's in there in terms of like intent, in terms of buyer behavior, in terms of all this stuff. But yeah, being able to prompt the technology is a crucial piece.
All right, Chris, I could talk to you all day, but then I'll go over my time zone that I try to put this in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, I'd rather talk about the sales, the inspection. It's an easier topic. But no, I born and raised outside of Montreal in Canada. Moved to Colorado. Started a sales career here in Colorado, and started at Exactly, which was incentive compensation software.
I remember that.
And it was cool software. We went through an IPO there. I learned a lot, and then I came over to Sumo Logic. I wanted to be in what I would call deeper technology. Nothing to knock on Exactly. It was a complex Excel spreadsheet with a very pretty front end and so on and so forth. And that was, and then break into real technology, infrastructure, AI, observability, security, things that I think are more of a need to have versus a want. And and then I've got 3 beautiful young kids, wife. Visit my parents all the time in Montreal, but based here in Denver, Colorado. So yeah, that's a little bit of background on me. Love the outdoors. Yeah.
And you're a good guy overall. I can vouch for that.
I appreciate that.
All right. So Chris, these days, what's your 1% edge? What have you been working on to get better and continue to stay on top?
That's, I kind of alluded to it. I think I really focus on the critical thinking piece on a day-to-day basis. Like, how can I be more conscious of the situation, whether that be the macro economy, the things going on at the potential prospect, the things going on internally at Sumo, and just really be aware of my surroundings when I go to ask questions or when I go to like dive into a particular piece. I think that piece is super important. It's something I focus on a regular basis. That, and I've been getting older. It happens to everybody, but just physical and mental health. Like, I was at yoga at 5:00 this morning, prepping for this, making sure I was in the right mindset. I think it's really, really important to just have a good, and however people find it, could be a walk in the woods, could be a jog, could be yoga, could be strength training, could be, cycling, whatever it is people do. But I think the whole physical, mental health piece right now is super important. So that's what I've been focused on to get myself 1% better every single day.
Yeah. In fact, one of the podcasts I did was about, fitness and its impact on business in your professional career. And I will honestly say I've sucked at it over the years. So one of the things I've done just recently is I got a trainer, which forces me to go to the gym because I'm paying for this guy. And I'm just trying to, like you said, put a little bit more emphasis on it because I know I haven't gotten there. The other thing, you talk about I'm trying to, everyone always tries to read books, but I'm trying to be more specific about it. And I'm trying to work on skills outside of just sales, right? So for example, one I'm reading right now is all about communication and being a better communicator. And it's not just important in your work life, but even in my personal life with my partner and everything. So I think that's important stuff to keep improving yourself and you just, who you are as a human being.
Yeah. Work should never define you. Life's too short. As much as we spend a lot of time and I've got a lot of passion there, your point on communication and so on and so forth, reading books, like I've always been a relatively avid reader. I was a philosophy major in college. So it was like reading. And I wish I had more time for that lately with the 3 young kids, but yeah, good for you for just making a conscious effort. That's what we have to do. And to go back to your comment on Fitz, I've got a lot to thank him for, but getting comfortable in the uncomfortable is what people need to do every single day.
Amen. All right. So Chris, if people want to get to know you better, reach out to you, learn more about Sumo Logic, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great option. They could always ask you my email, but yeah, LinkedIn, it's Chris Bowman, current Vice President Commercial Sales at Sumo Logic. Find me there and shoot me a note. Love to continue the conversation with anybody that's curious.
I really appreciate you being on the podcast, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carlos.
All right, everyone. That does it for this week's episode. If you found value in our conversation, please comment back, subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, I wish you nothing but the greatest success. Thanks again, Chris.
Cheers. Thanks, Carlos.